pressure slowly building. An explosion that shocked the world. A coastline forever changed. The oil impossible to remove. Nothing could destroy it until the source was found, until that source was sealed. To uncover the source of Islamic terror, read the Qur'an Dilemma, Islam Unplugged.
Well, welcome back to the Islamic Dilemma show. My guest, Bill Warner, and myself have been discussing a very disgusting topic, as a matter of fact, and that's the fact that women in Islam are not treated equally at all. In fact, they are treated like objects, that they are demeaned, demoralized, and also they are considered to be a less status than men, and not just a tiny less status, we're talking by far. In fact, we looked at one of your statistical slides, and it shows that 71% of all passages in the Quran prove that women have a lower status.
And we haven't even scratched the surface of this. Everything, there's so much material in the Quran about women.
Absolutely, absolutely, and my hope is that as time progresses, that we will do more episodes that are specialized in maybe one topic at the time when it comes to women. We're moving on to another slide of yours, Bill, and this time you took the Hadith and you did the same analysis. Tell us more about this.
Well, I took Bukhari. I don't want to get too technical here, but that is the major, most authoritative collection of Muhammad's hadith.
And before we proceed further, I want to mention to our audience, in case they were not following us in the previous episodes, that hadith is basically the collection of all of the sayings of the Prophet. And some Muslim scholars believe that the sayings of the prophets are also divinely inspired, basically. So, in other words, the Muslim person better really follow them if they want to earn good deeds.
Right.
Okay?
And I did with the Hadith exactly what I did with the Quran. I went through the Hadith and selected out every single tradition that related to women. And again, I put them into 4 piles. One pile is, yes, a woman is mentioned, but it's just in passing, it doesn't really tell us anything. Then a pile in which the woman is superior, equal, and then in low status. And if anything, in the Hadith, it's worse. Because at least in the Quran, only 71% of the verses are about low status. In the Hadith, it's 89%. And we have the equal status on Judgment Day, but we've already covered that on Judgment Day she'll be judged how she submitted to her husband. And then high status as a woman, 0.6%.
I almost thought it was 0, but well, at least there was something in there.
I give fair credit where fair credit is due. And again, let me emphasize, this is the totality of Bukhari. Don't come in with some one hadith and say, well, see, this hadith is good. I've included it.
Good point. Now, I want to go back to the previous slide. Just I want to show something very interesting. If we go back to the previous slide, which is the status of women in Quran, you're going to notice that looking at this slide, looking at the bar chart, they're almost identical.
Yes.
So if we look at the Quran and we look at the Hadith, they're almost identical in look, not necessarily in percentage.
Yes.
So in other words, this really confirms our theory that in order for you to understand Quran, you must understand the life of the Prophet and vice versa. So this is indicative, really, of what Muhammad's been doing, saying, and teaching, and the Quran is a reflection of all of that.
Yes. It is very coherent. It all lines up very nicely. It all fits.
Absolutely. And what's going to happen now is I am going to spin this in a different direction. We have been at least talking about the status of women in general, and we talked about their status in marriage. We talked about their rights as a wife and how the fact that the husband have the right to be not only superior over them, but also beat them if he even have a slice of suspicion, I should say, against them. And then we talked about what happens in terms of divorce, remarriage, and the teaching that she must be remarried to another man, and then the prescribed waiting period which in chapter 65, verse 4, we read something that is really troubling and alarming, the fact that it talks about young girls who have yet to reach their menstruation period, basically. In other words, they haven't even reached the puberty or the age of puberty. And then we looked at your statistical charts. I would like now to focus maybe on one or two specific areas that the Quran talks about when it comes to the status of women. Bill, I'm not so sure really if you knew that the Quran actually does not really have a high view of women in terms of their mockery, in terms of their trickery, in terms of their plotting ability, and in terms of what they call their scheming ability.
Right.
We're looking right now at a passage found in chapter 12, verse 28. The chapter 12 called the chapter of Yusuf or Joseph, basically.
Yes.
So the name is indicative of the fact that it talks about the story of Joseph.
Yes.
In this particular passage, verse 28, it is talking about what appears to be similar to the biblical account, although it's not exactly the same. As we know from the biblical account that in Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, that Joseph was working for a master called Potiphar, and his wife basically tried to at least entice Joseph to have a sexual relationship with her. Now, the Quran took that story, of course, and added some more details to it, if you want to call them details. And it says that the woman who was trying to entice Joseph to have sexual relationship with her actually was being teased by her friends. And they were wondering, why does she want to have a relationship like this with a slave who is a servant that is working with her at her home? And she apparently, according to the teaching of the Quran and the story, invited them over.
Right.
And she wanted them to see for themselves the kind of man that he was so beautiful, that he was worthy of all of her efforts.
Yes.
And then the passage tells us that Joseph basically ran away from their attempt also to seduce him. And then the husband of this woman, apparently discovering what was going on, made a claim against not just his wife, but all of her friends. We read this in this verse. It says, so when he, meaning the husband of the woman, saw his shirt, meaning the shirt of Joseph, apparently he wanted to run away from them. They grabbed him, or she grabbed him from the back, so that got his shirt cut off or ripped, torn at the back, meaning that this proved to the husband that Joseph is innocent because he was running away and someone obviously was trying to grab him from the back. Nevertheless, he still was sent to jail, which is, I'm not so sure why the Quran is trying to get into these details anyway. And then it says that the husband says, surely it is a plot of you women, not just his wife, all of women, certainly mighty is your plot. Now, the Arabic word can also mean is your tricks or as your schemes. Now, so far, we're reading about a story that took place apparently 4,000 years ago.
Exactly.
Now, I'm not seeing anything wrong so far in a husband being upset and making such a claim, stating that you and your friends are really, you know, basically people of a mighty scheme, okay? Do you know, Bill, that when you read the commentaries on this particular verse, actually the commentators are convinced that this label against women applies to all women at all time, the entire race.
Right.
In fact, it says that women basically are mighty in their trickery because they do it in a soft and a subtle way that they cause men to fall into trouble all the time. In fact, I looked at a number of those commentators and I wanted to basically analyze the trend. The story took place 4,000 years ago. Islam was revealed 1,400 years ago, so about 14 centuries ago, okay? And then you look at some of the commentators like Al-Zamakhshari, 12th century. He insists that this applies to all women. Al-Razi, the 13th century. He agrees with everybody else so far.
And a highly respected scholar.
Al-Qurtubi, another highly respected scholar, 13th century. He also agrees that it applies to all women. Al-Jalalain, 14th century, another respected scholar.
Yes.
It applies to all women. And then we have a scholar who lives in our time, the 21st century, At-Tantawi. He also agrees that this claim about women applies to all women even today. So there has been a consistent approach in terms of interpreting this verse. My problem is this: why do we have to label women in such a way for something that was done 4,000 years ago? Didn't Islam improve the status of women?
Good point. I never thought about this.
That's something I want really to address to a Muslim woman who's watching me. Whether you are originally a Muslim woman, born that way, or you're a convert to Islam, please help me out. I am troubled. I do not understand. Why are you being blamed for something that was done 4,000 years ago by a person that have died back then, that she attempted something that you yourself have nothing to do with it whatsoever? But of course, that's really telling of how the Prophet himself claimed that most women are going to be in hell because of what Eve have done too. So he's taking it even further.
Yes.
Now we're going to take a look at also another troubling passage. Not only the trickery of women is mighty, in fact the Quran compares it to the trickery of Satan. And it says that trickery of Satan is weak.
Yes.
Those commentators that I just mentioned, and they are just a sample, by the way, of the many commentators that you will read in that verse, always say the trickery is very mighty compared to the trickery of Satan.
They're
What does
worse
that
than
mean?
Satan.
That's exactly what it means.
They're more
Women
evil
are
than
worse than Satan. In fact, they make Satan look like a child.
Exactly.
That's what Islam teaches.
Satan could learn from a woman.
Ladies and gentlemen, does that sound to you that Islam have improved the status of women? If it did, where in this passage do we read this?
We don't.
Well, Bill, this has been really something that I have struggled with all along in trying to explain to myself, nevertheless explaining to anybody else who is a female about the status of women in Islam. I can imagine if I was a Muslim person today, what exactly would I tell my daughter, for instance, if she comes across a verse like this? That it happened 4,000 years ago, but that's not what the Sharia is teaching, that's not what the law is teaching, that's not what the Quran is teaching, that's not what the commentators are teaching.
All of this material we're talking about is carried forward into current Sharia law. This is not ancient history. This is not old stuff that's gone behind. It is active today in Sharia courts.
Absolutely. And you know, Bill, once again, we are unfortunately running out of time on this very interesting topic.
We'll do more.
And my hope that we will continue to address this very important topic, and it's really on my heart because I want Muslim women in general and convert to Islam who are female to please take a close look at these kind of teachings. Be honest with yourself and examine those references that we are providing to you, and even examine the original sources if you are able to read the Arabic language. Our hope that you will take these teachings and begin to do a quick check whether Islam have really improved your status as a human being before anything else, or specifically as a female. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much for joining us today in such an important topic and joining us with our episode. Please look at the address, the website that will be shown on the screen. Send us your questions and comments and suggestions. Until then, may you have a mega blessed day.